pretty sure that everyone has heard some version of the phrase, your grades don't define you, at a certain point in their lives. I would say that I'm actually pretty supportive of that notion, and for some inexplicable reason, it also has led me to ponder on why this is largely the case. I've also received plenty of questions from my juniors or even my brother on what is it that makes the real world so different from the school environment that we were all brought up in. Might as well throw in university just to emphasize that point, because I can assure you, they are very different. Hey friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name is Bianca, and today I'd like to talk about how the school environment differs from the real world. And part of it is because I personally have also observed how, seemingly unimpressionable individuals in school can actually still thrive in the real world, even though their end-of-term report cards may not exactly suggest so. On the other hand, I have also witnessed how some of their counterparts who may be geniuses on paper may not exactly be doing as well when they're thrown into a workplace. So in this video, I just thought of sharing some of my thoughts on why this mismatch may have occurred. As always, all of the content in this video are just basically the thoughts coming from a 22-year-old fresh graduate. The points I am going to bring up are really just a simplification of reality, plus I probably am still really naive about a lot of things, so just consider this video as a timestamp of thoughts, shall we say. Let's get right into it. The first point I'd like to bring up as to why school and the real world may differ so much is because of something that I would call as information arbitrage. So the term arbitrage is probably music to the ears of people from the finance world, but for the uninitiated, the term arbitrage, as how Harvard Business School defines it, is basically an investment in which an investor simultaneously buys and sells an asset in different markets to take advantage of a price difference and generate a profit. While most price differences are typically small and short-lived, the returns can be impressive when multiplied by a large volume. In simple terms, when the price of something valuable differs between two different markets, so let's just say the US market and the Singaporean market, the most logical move that you can do is to just buy that item from the market that is selling it at a lower price, and then after that, selling the same item at the market where the customers are willing to buy your item off at a higher price. As a result, you'll make money from the difference in your selling price versus the initial cost that you had to incur when you bought the item. With that, the same concept also applies to information. Fundamentally, information arbitrage exists because the real world isn't 100% efficient, and realistically speaking, no one can be an expert in every single subject. For instance, maybe there's someone who can know everything about programming and artificial intelligence, or even that's also kind of unrealistic. But then when you try to ask them about the history of art, let's just say, they may not even know where to even begin. But don't worry, that's actually a pretty normal thing, because what you are knowledgeable of really depends on the environment that you grew up in, the amount of learning exposure you have gotten during your childhood, the people you happen to know, the life experiences you've gathered, and the things you do as a hobby, and so on. To illustrate an example, let's just say two business women with the same business acumen, work ethic, and charisma were each given 10 boxes of apples to sell. The only difference between these two individuals is that only person A knows that fruit blenders exist, whilst person B doesn't. And just because person A knows that fruit blenders exist, she can use it to just make apple juice and sell it at a much higher price compared to selling fresh apples at a lower profit margin. With that, I highly doubt that you will be surprised to know that person A eventually managed to bring in a higher profit than person B, even though both of them worked equally hard to sell these apples. This is just a really simple example of information arbitrage, where the presence or absence of certain information can really just make a huge difference in a person's life or even career trajectory. If we were to relate this to the real world, you eventually quickly realize that there's just a lot of things that we all just don't know about. And even when we have search engines like Google, you will just know that we can never download all the information in the world into our head. That's not gonna happen anytime soon. As a result, there will always be topics where we're all just simply not very knowledgeable of. On the other hand, I could argue that the school environment is basically an artificial one, because it essentially tries to minimize information arbitrage. And that's because if you think about it, all students will need to be taught a standardized education curriculum in preparation for their exams. Therefore, this kind of creates a way of assessing individual performances fairly and at scale. So, similar to one of the points I made in my video regarding my venture capital internship, succeeding in the real world to some extent is attributed to your ability to access certain secrets or industry insights. They may not exactly be public knowledge. And the bottleneck that essentially limits your access to such insights could be things such as your network, your job scope at work, or even the area of the world that you live in. And that is just one of the key distinctive differences between school and the real world. For my second point, as much as I hate to admit my love-hate relationship between the whole concept of unfair advantages, I personally think that it's one of those inevitable truths that we all have to eventually accept and embrace at some point in our lives. But first things first, what do I mean by unfair advantages? Or so you may ask. As how the fellow YouTuber Ali Abdaal explained, unfair advantages are basically the unique talents and skills that you have based on your strengths, weaknesses, interests, or even your upbringing. You might just be someone who somehow naturally attracts people to you. You could be unusually good at coding for your age because you have been coding ever since the age of 8. Or you might have an atypically high level of job security because you have an exclusive access to certain business networks. And due to this reality, some people would have an unfair advantage over an equally intelligent peer. So let's just say we have two fresh graduates who are equal in their intelligence, talent, as well as work ethic, but the only difference is that they come from two very different backgrounds. Person A has been obsessed with stock market investing ever since the age of 13, whilst person B only learned about the concept of investing when they attended university. Well, I can't say that this is always the case, but based on their upbringing, I wouldn't be too surprised to know that person A is just much more likely to have a better investment acumen than person B when they both graduate from university. Regardless, I still believe that everyone is equipped with our own fair share of unfair advantages that we just all need to identify and learn to leverage on if we want to succeed in our own lives. The crucial bit I would say is just for you to look out and acknowledge them, and then hopefully try to use them to do good for yourself and for the community. Moving on to my third point, I would say that in the real world, having emotional maturity can bring you much further in life as opposed to having pure intelligence. Basically EQ over IQ. And I say that mainly because emotionally mature individuals are able to just navigate and manage their entire emotional spectrum, which is actually a key ingredient to help everyone to cultivate healthier and long-lasting relationships. In school, I would say that you can pretty much get away with having a high IQ but a low EQ because at the end of the day, you can pretty much take control of most things and therefore work entirely for yourself. But as you immerse deeper into the real world, things might not always be entirely within your control. Why do I say that? Because gatekeepers are everywhere. In my personal opinion, well, feel free to disagree with me, I would say that the real world is all about dealing with people, even if we're doing things for completely self-centered reasons. It doesn't matter if you're looking to retire by 30 and live a completely quiet life after that, or if you're looking to become the next, well, Elon Musk or Bill Gates. Relationships do matter if you ever want to achieve any of your goals. How so? Because the quality of our lives in every single aspect, it doesn't matter whether it is your personal life, your career life, or financial life, they are all pretty much correlated with the relationships you have. For instance, it would be much easier for you to enjoy your job if you get along with your colleagues at work. Or let's just say that you have a cause that you just deeply care about and you're hoping to make a positive change to the community, just like how Greta Thunberg did with her climate mitigation campaigns. You are going to need loads and loads of people who are willing to back you up on that. So there comes the importance of having the emotional maturity when you're trying to connect with people. In general, I would say that a lot of it basically boils down to your ability to manage and exercise control over your own emotions. Through that, you may just become much better at understanding people and communicating much more effectively, and thereby attract more people towards you. Moving on to my next point, another key difference between school and real life is that Unlike school, problems in the real world don't exactly come with answer sheets. If, let's just say, you have absolutely no clue as to how you could solve your math homework set by a teacher at school, well, there are always answer sheets for you to peek into, a friend or another teacher that you could call, or maybe you could just surf the internet in general to find a precise solution. But in real life, the key thing that we, or at least me, I'm just trying to remind myself from time to time, is that there are always multiple ways to solve one problem. Unlike the marking scheme for your school exams, where your examiners can sometimes be rather rigid or nitpicky as to how you have arrived to your solution, I would say that in the real world, it's more about whether you're able to achieve the outcome you want, regardless of the process. Well, at least that's the case most of the time, as long as it is legal. So this brings me to say that I would personally encourage you to just explore your own creativity and try to observe how different people from completely different personal and professional backgrounds solve similar problems. Because in the real world, there really isn't a definite or surefire way for you to just get what you want. It is all about devising your own path for you to get to where you want to be, as long as it stays true to your values and, of course, it is perfectly legal. With that, this leads me to my final point. To a large extent, there really isn't a right or wrong move in the real world, only choices. In a school environment, certain types of behaviors or actions will be rewarded or punished, depending a lot on the culture that the school is trying to inculcate within students. But in real life, okay, besides all of the universal common sense such as, well, don't commit murder, don't be a mean person, and just don't do anything that is downright and obviously wrong. Questions such as, should I quit my job and travel the world? Should I prioritize my family over my career? Should I just give everything up and start my own company? Or even things such as, should I stay single or get married? There really isn't a straightforward answer to any of that. So at the end of the day, we all need to just become much more comfortable with decision making and holding ourselves accountable for the consequences it has. This is probably one of the most intimidating realities that I faced when I entered the world of adulting, but I suppose I take comfort in the fact that humans are pretty good at learning as well as rebounding quickly from any mistakes that we may make along the journey quite quickly. All in all, it's a pretty complicated world out there. It can be a bit of an overwhelming experience for all of us, myself included. And to a certain degree, I would say that some of my discussion points could have semi-highlighted some of the flaws in our education system, as well as how, well, realistically speaking, some of our accomplishments could genuinely just be a series of lucky accidents as well as privileges. I guess this leads me to ask further questions such as, how could we improve the readiness of young people for a very different real world? And I'm trying my very best to believe that our work ethic, our mindset, as well as our actions are largely within our control. We can still always increase our chances of succeeding in whatever field that it is. So just like how the guy at my graduation ceremony said,
the status quo always requires some modification, and new ways of working are always needed to make a difference.
perhaps once we all have entered the real world and sort of just adapted to the reality, we as a generation could try to just utilize what we have to do good, and perhaps to try to improve the system so that we can make our world a much better and fairer place. So onwards and upwards after school, I guess. That being said, take it easy there, and thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video. Would really appreciate it if you could just smash the like, subscribe, and bell icon if you found my video to be insightful. I mean, honestly, feel free to leave any comments that you may have regarding some of my discussion points or anything that you might want to add from your own side. And if you're interested, I have actually produced another video where I talk about how everyone, like seriously everyone, has a unique superpower that you can offer to the world and how you could potentially discover it. Do check it out if you can, and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye!